Holding people accountable and treating them with dignity, well, they're not opposites. When we slap handcuffs on someone and we laugh at their addictions or their failures, are we really enforcing the law? Or are we really abdicating our responsibilities as leaders at the expense of people and certainly their shortcomings? Hello, my friends. Listen, you can be tough on crime without being cruel to people. Law enforcement executive and leaders who understand that build trust with their community, they strengthen their agency, and they make certainly their community safer. I have spent 30 years in law enforcement right here in Mobile County as a patrol officer, as a supervisor, commander, and investigator, and certainly as a chief of police. Hey, I have worked cases throughout this entire county. And one thing I know for sure is that everyone in this county really wants the same thing: safety, fairness, and of course, leadership they can trust. And that's what I want to talk about today. How do we, as executive law enforcement leaders, lead, how we speak, and how we treat people who have broken the law? Because they've broken the law, irrespective of what the law is, does that give the law enforcement officer, the deputy, or even the leader of those agencies the right to dehumanize people? No. A sheriff doesn't just enforce the law. A sheriff sets the tone for the industry as it relates to professionalism across the entire county, with every agency in this county, and certainly with every officer. In Mobile County, drug and alcohol addiction and mental health issues are not theoretical. They are reality. Listen, we've buried sons, daughters, mothers, and certainly fathers because of this crisis and epidemic. We've seen grandparents having to take on certainly the responsibility of raising grandchildren. We've watched families in urban neighborhoods and rural communities alike struggle with the same pain of crime, the addiction, and certainly the loss of life due to drugs. Every family in some capacity in this community is affected by drugs or alcohol abuse or mental health issues, dealing with family members, friends, or certainly friends of friends. No one is immune. I've sat across the tables for mothers in the city of Mobile who were terrified for their children's safety. I've talked to families in Grand Bay and Wilmer who felt forgotten because of the drug and crime-ridden neighborhoods. I have seen the effects of working families and drug addiction in Saraland and Citronelle just as deeply as it is anywhere else. Some analysis estimate that 78% of violent crimes, 83% of all property-related crime arrests, and 77% of public disorder and other offenses usually are related to those that commit those crimes with some type of substance abuse in some form or fashion. Recognizing that doesn't excuse crime, but ignoring it guarantees we'll see the same people cycle through the system again and again. That's what experience gives you insight to. I want to be very clear. As an executive law enforcement leader, we understand and support the notion of public safety that requires victims first mentality. I wholeheartedly agree. Law enforcement is about protecting people and their property. When someone commits a crime in Mobile County, they must answer for it. There are consequences. Victims deserve justice, and they always come first when it comes to restoring loss or seeking justice. I have always been tough on crime. As a conservative, I absolutely believe in self and system accountability. But over 3 decades as a career professional and certainly a chief of police, I've learned something very important. Enforcement alone doesn't stop behavior. Leadership understands human dynamics and how to help those out of their circumstances. My friends, people come from all walks of life where one person has been given the support, nurturing, love, discipline, and faith to overcome challenges in life without becoming addicted to drugs or substance abuse. And that's great. But there are others that have not had those same resources. Many of those people have the propensity to use drugs as a way to deal, certainly, with childhood trauma. I want you to watch this. Young man, and we blurred his face out. And this came here within the past week with, I guess, the sheriff's office or team sheriff on the social media Facebook page calls it Thug Thursdays. And I understand the concept with that. You know, what they're trying to do is appeal to every law-abiding citizen. But you put this young man on Facebook to ridicule and to mock him about the crisis and the addiction that he is struggling with. This is somebody's child. This could be a father. This could be a son, a nephew, a grandson. Now, it has hashtag fentanyl trafficker. I'm sure I have not read everything about this case. We are not talking about the crime. We are not even talking about the victims of the crime. What I am only referring to is, irrespective to the crime, is this the type of leadership that you, Mobile County, want, need, or are looking for in a sheriff's office? I would think not. I would absolutely think not. There are some comments here, certainly people that get it. They understand, certainly by these comments, that this is not acceptable. And I would agree with them, it's not acceptable. Please tell me this. What do we get as a society or a citizenry from mocking or ridiculing people that are dealing with a drug addiction? If you see the original picture, you would know. This episode is not about rights for victims. It's about why law enforcement feel the need to dehumanize people. That's not real leadership, in my opinion. Officers should not be rejoicing over someone's demise, even if it's from their own choices. Now, I want you to watch this. I'm not going to call the names of these particular deputies that have been involved in some nefarious misconduct or even criminal conduct under the current administration at the sheriff's office. But here's the thing, and we've blurred out their face because we're going to give them the same respect that we would give to the others. Now, but these are deputies, and they're held to a higher standard, even according to their oath. But let me tell you, this first case right here, this gentleman, it's my understanding. I make no confirmation that this person has a addiction to substance, drugs, alcohol, or otherwise. Seems like maybe I've read some things about that, maybe that led to some of the fraudulent activity that was going on, whether it was with overtime, fraudulent checks, whatever. I've read a lot about the case, but this case isn't. We're not talking about that case. What we're talking about is this individual that was a sheriff's deputy that got involved in criminal activity. The next officer is a younger officer. I'm not really sure how long he's been on. We won't give his name. We'll blur his face out. But if you'll remember, roughly, I believe it was April or May of 2025, this individual was off duty drinking in a county vehicle and rear-ended another individual. Basically, what I seen was following that person to a bar or maybe bar hopping, I don't know. But nonetheless, it's my understanding, and while I can't prove that, but it comes from a very, very reliable source, that one of the command staff officers from the sheriff's office went out, got the vehicle, and took possession, essentially, of the off-duty deputy. Now, if you go in here and read the comments from the sheriff that if you're going to be drinking, you shouldn't be driving a county vehicle. But yet we have no follow-up to that incident to determine if that deputy was disciplined as a result of drinking and driving. Was there a alcohol test done on this particular officer? If this officer, was he treated differently than any member of the public that was treated if caught with DUI? At the Mobile Police Department, the administrative offense would be considered unlawful conduct, was essentially criminal conduct. What measures were taken with that particular case? We don't know. Were those deputies treated any differently than the first gentleman that I showed? Were they ridiculed in any way on Team Sheriff's page? Were they mocked? Was there sarcasm or jokes used to disparage them, as it was the young man that I put up there earlier? Let me answer for you. Unequivocally, no. Nor should they be. But neither should the citizen have been disrespected, irrespective of the crime. That's bias. You have shown as a leader you cannot do your job of enforcing the laws of the county, state, and the federal government. Good officers and deputies would agree with me. We know everyone has bias, but to put it on public display at the taxpayer's expense without regard to the official position you hold suggests you have been operating without consequence for a long time. It's my opinion this behavior opens the door to litigation and lawsuits, especially given the nature of the comments or actions of the primary law enforcement official in this county. It sends a bad message, a message that our law enforcement officers are just like that. And they're not. The mentality is do as I say do, not as I do. My friends, that's tyranny. But you will not realize it until it knocks on your doorsteps. Are you and your loved one facing this mindset? Then perhaps, then, only then, will you question the power in place. Mocking people after an arrest doesn't prevent crime in our community, it weakens it. The men and women of law enforcement in Mobile County are professionals. I know because I've worked with them. They put on the badge knowing they may face danger, criticism, or even scrutiny. They didn't sign up to be part of a public spectacle, a biased organization that now reflects poorly on them and certainly their families. When leadership treats arrests like entertainment, people, it sends the wrong message to deputies, certainly to the courts, and to the public. The badge is not a prop. Mugshots are not punchlines, and people in crisis are not social media content. It has to stop. Research from the Department of Justice and decades of policing experience tell us the same thing. Agencies that emphasize professionalism, accountability, and fair treatment certainly see better cooperation and fewer repeat offenses, not only with the citizenry, but with the officers on the force as well. That doesn't mean we go easy. It means we do our job with the professional standards that are above reproach. Listen, during my career, we enforced the law with a concerted effort. That's why we reduced homicides by 65%. and sexual assaults by 45%. But we also worked to intervene in crimes before they happen, whether through outreach coordination of mental health providers or simply knowing our communities. My friends, Mobile County deserves a sheriff who is firm, fair, and certainly disciplined. One who restores order without losing sight of our humanity. Leadership is not measured by arrest, but by trust, professionalism, and real results that last. That's the kind of sheriff I intend to be. One who presents professionalism, discipline, and one that partners with its community to resolve issues, restores law and order, and understands that regardless of who we are, where we work, or where we come from, each and every person deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. Think of this. Aside from the chronic criminal, how many people listening to this podcast today has found yourself in an unfortunate incident and had to be arrested, certainly by circumstances that you're involved in? It happens. Does that make you a criminal? Well, unfortunately, our top law enforcement official likes to degrade people for arrest. As your sheriff, I will not use the office of sheriff or tax money to mock or ridicule or humiliate you as a result. In fact, it should cease immediately. Some of the incumbent supporters will make this message something that it's not, in that it will be said, I am a sympathizer of criminals. This program has said just the opposite. The point in today's program is to say that as leaders, we should not mock or humiliate people because they broke the law. We will still take them to the courts, and they will still have to face the consequences of their actions through the legal system and not by the sheriff. Let's get this straight. Empathy is not sympathy. Empathy means understanding the forces at play while still enforcing the law. Sympathy excuses behavior, and public ridicule does neither. Breaking the law does not give us the authority of humiliating, degrading people for a public spectacle or for social media clicks. This does not make us leaders. It shows weak leadership that has been elevated beyond its ability to lead. Just maybe real leaders after 30 years of service should understand the condition of a flawed humanity and try to get some of these folks help rather than ridicule them, so they can be restored in their families and communities. My friends, that's what makes us safer, and it reduces crime. This reminds me of middle school bullying tactics. Do you know why we will never stop bullies within the school system? Well, I'll tell you right here today. Because kids see adults do it in the real world. They see it, and yet they will continue the same tactics and cycle once they enter the workforce. Leaders don't humiliate people. They hold them accountable and, yes, even help restore them for those who won't help. As leaders, we understand the high recidivism rate. If we get to a point in law enforcement profession that we are unable to help people and all we are left with is dehumanizing people for popularity, I would argue we've lived a life in the wrong profession. Yes, in many cases, incarceration is help. But let me remind you that none of us are perfect people. My sins may be different from yours or theirs. Nonetheless, can you imagine for one moment if your nefarious deeds were all on public display without context or reasons why? It would be humiliating. Yet we seem to all be on social media pointing fingers at one another oftentimes, while we may be doing the very same things. But then we are appalled when some of the leaders treat us the same way. Being a law enforcement officer or a leader of an organization does not make us superior to anyone else. It's an occupation. In part, the lawman's oath of office is to keep his professional and his private life above reproach, not perfection. A model citizen, if you will. I would argue the type of rhetoric from the sheriff's office is a violation of the oath. That's an embarrassment. I consider myself a professional. Politics did not get me to the top. Work ethic, experience, and education did. Politics is what got me out of office. It is one thing to inform the public when someone is arrested, especially when violent crimes are involved. But it is something entirely different when we lose sight of our integrity by forgetting these people's humanity. In today's world of social media, a single moment of failure can follow a person forever. Public shaming doesn't end at the arrest. It echoes, it multiplies, and it often destroys any chance of recovery or even redemption. Yet we are all people of redemption, second, third, and 100 chances. The sheriff routinely repeats Sandy Stimpson and Jimmy Barber's lies that I'm hard to get along with. That administration certainly tried to make the case through their political hit job. But go back and watch the forums of the mayoral race last year. It shows Birch is repeating the same narrative, which ultimately means he has no substance, merit, or experience to run this race on. I will never personally attack the individual man. However, political records are up for public scrutiny, including mine. Mr. Birch's social media content is demeaning, degrading, and lacks the standard of professionalism, especially what his agency is supposed to stand for. And that is simply service, integrity, and character. Some will suggest I am being nasty, but I'm not. All I'm addressing is really the low hanging fruit as to what leadership is or what it shouldn't be. It's my opinion. We haven't even got started on this campaign. There's a lot to cover, but we must ask ourselves, who and what are we becoming in society? Because the song Man in the Mirror reminds us real change doesn't start with pointing fingers, it starts with looking within. My friends, thank you for tuning in. Please share, like, and subscribe to the podcast. At the end of the day, we also want to grow the platform for Prime for Sheriff on Facebook. There you'll find all the content. You'll find what I'm about. You'll find out certainly what the contract with Mobile Citizens is. And let me just simply say this. We'll see you again on the next program. Lord willing, and the creek don't rise.